Hello. In today's digital age, understanding cyber risk is more important than ever. In this video, we take a deep dive into the concept of cyber risk and explore how it impacts individuals, businesses, and societies as a whole. What exactly is cyber risk, and why should we be extremely concerned about it going into 2025? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cyber Risk Ready. I'm your host, Tom Kraus. Whether you're a tech novice or a seasoned professional, this video will help equip you with the knowledge you need to navigate the cyber landscape safely. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more valuable content on cybersecurity and risk management. I'm honored to have on the show today Mr. Brian O'Hara. Mr. O'Hara has spent the last 30 years working in IT as cybersecurity as an IT director, a CISO, a virtual CISO for a number of large corporations and governmental organizations, and most recently has served as a National Strategic Engagement Advisor for the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Indianapolis Division. In addition to his work in cybersecurity, he's also gained recognition as an expert in governance, risk, and compliance with specialties in healthcare, manufacturing, and the financial sectors. He's volunteered his leadership expertise as a charter member and a strategic advisor to Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb's Executive Council on Cybersecurity, the state's effort for improving our critical infrastructure resiliency. Mr. O'Hara taught and served as the Information Technology Chairperson for Ivy Tech Fort Wayne and developed risk management courseware for Indiana Tech. He served as the cyber coach for Ivy Tech's collegiate cyber defense competitions for 7 years and as the state director for 2. He's a frequent cybersecurity speaker at local and national conferences such as RSA, Secure World, and Indy Big Data, and is a regular IT subject matter expert contributor to IT Prov TV. Mr. O'Hara has published books in the Indiana Bankers Journal and has served as a technical editor for several books for Wiley Publishing. Mr. O'Hara earned his bachelor's degree in economics from Indiana University and a master's degree in counseling and psychology from the University of North Dakota. Over the course of his career, he has served in numerous leadership positions with local and national information security organizations, such as the president of ISACA's Indiana chapter, the secretary of ISC Squared Indianapolis chapter, and the president of the Indiana InfraGard Members Alliance, part of the FBI's private sector outreach. He's earned numerous awards for his leadership, including the Information Security Association's fellowship status, ISC Squared ISLA Community Achievement Award for outstanding leadership in information security, and the Indiana Diversity Award for efforts recruiting minorities and women with the Indiana InfraGard Indiana Blue Shield Service Award, and his lifetime contribution towards protecting America's infrastructure through leadership, dedication, and security as an exemplary service. Mr. O'Hara also graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy and the FBI CISO Academy. His hobbies include reading, writing, playing guitar, riding motorcycles, and working in his own workshop. Mr. O'Hara, Brian, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Sure. Brian, do you have any introductory comments that you'd like to make?
No, I think this is a timely topic. Tom, you and I have worked together for years on trying to increase public awareness around cyber risks, risk management, doing risk assessments, managing cybersecurity, et cetera. And I think this is another great avenue for pursuing that. So thanks for making the effort to do that.
Well, great. Thanks. So everybody online, please join us then as we break down the difference in different cyber threats from data breaches to ransomware attacks and provide insights into how these risks can affect your personal information and financial security. We're also going to discuss the latest trends in cybersecurity and what you can do to protect yourself in an increasingly connected world. Cyber risk is a bigger threat to your everyday life than what you think. And during this presentation, we'll hopefully show you exactly how it impacts you going into 2025. Most of us probably aren't surprised to hear that cyber attacks have surged over the past year alone. It's clear that we're living in a digital battlefield, and if you think you're safe, you might want to think again. So, what's the deal with cybersecurity risk? In today's hyper connected world, it's not just big companies or tech geeks that need to be worried. Cyber risks impact all of us. Whether you're scrolling through social media or managing your online banking, these risks can sneak up on anyone. So let's break it down on why it matters to you. All right, Brian, let's talk about the types of cyber threats that are lurking out there. Talk to me a little bit about what are the different categories of risks and why businesses should be concerned about those.
Well, to start off with, from a business perspective, I think the primary risk um, that business owners think about is financial risk. They want to know what's going to happen to my financials should something like this happen. The different kinds of risks that they typically have to deal with are beyond financial, are both reputational and operational. And when I say that, what I mean is financial risks involve what would happen if there was a fraudulent wire transfer, or well, mostly it's mostly it's wire transfers, but fraudulent financial transactions inside an organization, whether that be some kind of fraud by an employee, or something that happens where a fraudulent email comes in with somebody purporting to be an officer in the corporation, instructing a lesser employee to do something that they would not normally do. Those are the kinds of financial risks that most businesses are facing today. But secondly, and almost as important, are the reputational risks involved. Nobody likes to have their name in the newspaper. Nobody likes to have their name in the police logs. So companies are oftentimes reluctant to report these kinds of crimes for fear of it damaging their reputation. They're afraid to be seen as sort of not on top of things, if you will. Um, and then third, and unfortunately not the most important, but the third one is operational risks. That has to do with the fact that, let's say you're a car dealership and you're hit with a ransomware attack, and all of your data is locked up temporarily. You can no longer sell cars. You can't buy cars. You can't make payroll to your employees because your bank accounts are frozen. And so the operational repercussions are pretty severe. We don't normally think of those first, unfortunately. I think they're just as important as the financial and reputational, but they're certainly there. There's no question about that. Anytime you have any kind of cyber event or risk which is realized, you're going to have operational impacts as well as financial and reputational.
Brian, how are those types of things translated into the things that that individuals deal with? So, you mentioned a lot about businesses and those kinds of
Sure.
things, but how does that correlate to what the everyday person on the streets running into?
Sure. So on an individual level, it can translate into identity theft, which we've been hearing about for well over a decade and a half now. That's nothing new, and you hear about it increasingly. I think we've almost become numb to it because it happens so often. I don't know anyone it's happened to recently. I do believe the incidence of identity theft has been on the decline for a number of years, but the impact has continued to increase, meaning that if an individual or nefarious group were to get access to your bank information or your healthcare information, it could be very damaging to you financially. Most of the time, with individuals, it's financial damage, financial risk that's at stake. Only occasionally is it reputational. Should that person be the head of a company, CEO, a CFO, a bank president, vice president, someone like that, where it were to get into the news, it could reflect poorly on the organization. But on an individual level, it has to do with things like stealing your credit cards. I don't know if your bank does this, but I know mine does. If I travel outside the state of Indiana, my debit card automatically gets frozen the minute I hit the state line, unless I contact them prior to my leaving and notify them, hey, I'm going to be traveling this week, and here's the states I'm going to be traveling through. That's part of their fraud prevention efforts at keeping people from stealing debit cards and or reproducing them and going across state lines with fraudulent transactions.
Mhm. That's my father-in-law had a credit card. It was a shell credit card actually, and I know when he was on vacation, he had to call and let Shell know that he was going to be traveling. A very similar kind of situation. But I'm wondering if that's a default for most banks, or if that's something that you have to call and activate.
No, it is today. It is fairly routine. It wasn't shortly as 5 years ago. It's only been in recent history that they've started implementing it and getting tighter and tighter on it. And it's had a huge impact on the reduction in identity theft. That's one of the reasons why I think identity theft is on the decline, not hugely, but slowly on the decline, is because both credit card companies and banks have made a great investment in fraud protection, because it eventually goes back and costs them. Your legal liability with credit cards for decades now has been $50 per transaction. It used to be on debit cards that there was no protection. Today, my understanding is it's still $50 per transaction, but you do have a responsibility of reporting it within 30 days. Whereas with credit cards, you have a little larger window than that, than those 30 days. But I think it's due to their humongous investment in fraud protection that we're safer today than we have been in decades.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Um, Brian, how are cyber criminals leveraging technology used by everyday folks? My cell phone, my family's cell phone, or those types of computers, or you know, my laptop, desktop, whatever it is. Uh, you know, you hear all the time where individuals have been some kind of a mule, or some other kind of term where actors
Hmm.
use their equipment unknowingly to the owner uh,
Sure.
for various kinds of things. And so, what have you seen, and what do you think folks should be looking out for in that regard?
Well, one of the things that's definitely on the upswing is the use of artificial intelligence. Tools like ChatGPT are being used. You know, 10, 15 years ago, I can still remember we in cybersecurity we still kind of make jokes about the Nigerian prince emails that happened back in the day, and that was because the English was so poor. You had to almost be a moron to fall for it, because when you read them, you were like, "Who is this from? This isn't even English."
Sure.
Their grammar was so poor. Well, that's no longer true with tools like ChatGPT. You can receive emails that look as though they're crafted by your CEO or by your ex-wife or by your cousin. And in fact, one of the other things that we're seeing more and more of recently is, I didn't prepare a slide for you, but if you take a look at the Cyrillic alphabet, which is what Russians use, there are several letters in there that look very much like letters in our alphabet, like the letter C. So one of those you see is an email that comes from, let's just say Billy Bob is your cousin, billybob.com. And that C is not a C, it's a Cyrillic C, which is a Russian domain, not a standard .com domain, and you can't tell the difference. And so you hit reply and you send them all the information that they're requesting, because you think it's from your cousin. And next thing you know, you've been hacked. So
Okay.
you're seeing things like that. The level of sophistication has never been higher. The kinds of things that they're doing today, in particular, because they're being assisted with artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, they're able to make those scams look more and more and more and more realistic all the time.
In the business environment, I think there's a lot of tools out there that help cybersecurity professionals in the business world, uh, understand and grab that, and try to identify those kinds of emails and
Hmm.
campaigns and those kinds of things. But when you're, just like, soccer mom, or baseball dad, and you're just doing your day-to-day thing, and maybe you don't have a lot of expertise in that area.
Sure.
uh, the Cyrillic alphabet that you mentioned, I mean, that's something that I see pretty much on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many folks actually are able to look at something and identify that and recognize it. You have any feel for that?
Yeah, it's very few. But I did make a note here. One of the things that I can tell anybody and everybody to do to protect themselves as much as they possibly can, based on the idea that they don't know much about that, is please keep your operating systems and your applications up to date. The vendors like Apple and Microsoft and Google are constantly updating their software to plug security holes so that those kinds of things can't slip through. So, for instance, now that we know that the Cyrillic C is being used more and more junk email filter capabilities are being built to catch that kinds of stuff, so that mom and pops don't even have to see it. It gets caught automatically for them. But that won't happen if you don't keep your operating systems and your applications up to date. I know it gets to be a little bit technical. I have a few family members who are constantly, I'm having to dog about keeping their operating systems up to date, because they're like, why? It's kind of, it's too much trouble. I'm like, well, you won't think that the next time they get a hold of your bank account.
Sure.
And so I really encourage people. It's very simple to do. Apple's, you know, in years past, we have had some unfortunate experiences with those kinds of with operating system updates breaking things, crashing things, etc. That's very rare today. It happens occasionally and only to maybe a small number of users. The vast majority of that stuff is tested ad nauseum by engineers to make sure that, because it costs them money when those things go south on them. So please keep your operating systems up to date, keep your applications up to date, keep an eye on your vendors, anybody you're working with. Um, in business it's a different conversation because you can't always do that. But mom and pops always have the ability to do that. They're not using proprietary applications that are going to break because they updated their operating system. They're using Apple Mail or Google Mail, and it's not going to break because you updated the operating system.
Sure. Well, thanks for that. And that kind of brings up the whole topic of malware. When we look at individual risks and those kinds of things, and certainly updating operating systems and applications within mobile devices and other devices help minimize that opportunity for nefarious folks to install malware on your systems. And but in your experience, business users and individuals, uh, are there any other avenues you think that they're opening themselves up for malware risks other than uh, updating their updating their operating system and their various applications that they're using?
Well, I think most fairly aware businesses today have commercial spam filtering systems or services that they pay for. It's very rare. In fact, Microsoft does a pretty decent job all on its own when you have an Office 365 subscription, whether you're a business or an individual. They do a pretty good job of filtering stuff without you having to do anything. But there's an entire set of industries that have grown up over the last 10 years, KnowBe4 being the foremost of those, that not only provide filtering for those kinds against those kinds of attacks, but also training for employees to help them learn how to not get sucked into those kinds of things. Is that what you're getting at?
It is, yeah. And you mentioned Microsoft, and I'm an advocate for Microsoft Defender, which
Hmm.
is their out of the box malware detection tool and that kind of thing. And I think that they continually work to enhance that.
Yes.
But I don't know that people recognize that they can just simply turn that on. That with Windows, I mean, that's a tool
Right.
that's basically free. They don't have to invest a lot of other resources in getting different things.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but there's also a free version for iPhones. and for
Ah,
Android phones that you can put on that not only protects you from malware, but also acts as a VPN client so that when you're in unsecured wireless situations, it will VPN your traffic out to Microsoft before so that it's not so that nefarious users are unable to see your data traversing the Wi-Fi network if should it not be encrypted.
I was not aware that there was a tool for the Defender tool for the iPhone, and
Yeah, and it's
uh,
free, and it's free. Yeah, it'll run on both your iPhone and your iPad.
wow, nice. Okay, well,
Yeah,
thanks.
so they're constantly trying to come up with tools. Um, it's that stuff's not free. So, they're earning revenue through their Office 365 subscriptions, but it also winds up saving them money from customers screaming at them because they got malware in the first place. So there's a kind of a two sides to that benefits them for doing it. One is it protects their end users, and number two, that keeps their end users from screaming at them because they mom and pops don't know anything about all that stuff. And the old belief is that you don't need antivirus software on your phone. Well, you may not need antivirus software, but there are certain things you need to do to protect the information on that phone and your connection, especially mom and pops who don't pay attention to Wi-Fi. That's why with Microsoft Defender, you can actually set it so that that VPN runs all the time. So it doesn't matter whose Wi-Fi you're on, you're being VPN'd out to a Microsoft site before your data goes to the internet so that nobody locally can sniff your packets, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Okay,
can't sniff your data on the airwaves.
sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. That's good
Yeah.
information. Well, hey, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about phishing attacks. So that's where scammers trick you into giving away sensitive information by pretending to be someone you trust. You referenced it just a little bit ago with regards to some of the emails that you might get, the Cyrillic alphabet. But what changes are you seeing in attack vectors for that?
Well, so first of all, I'd like to back up and say it's not just a matter of getting you to give up information. It could also very easily and very often be used to plant tools in your network that you're unaware of. So you click on a link, and as far as you know, it redirects. Let me give you an example. So I'll send you a crafted email that has a link for you to log into your bank account that says you need to do something, and you click on it, and it in fact takes you to your bank. So you don't know anything different, right? It looks legitimate to you. But in the meantime, it also just downloaded a set of tools that nefarious actors use to worm their way through your network. So it's not always about giving up information. Sometimes it's just allowing someone access to get inside that network so that they can start planting tools and then using those later on. So they come back at 4 in the morning when no one's around and start jumping from server to server and looking around for stuff and doing scans.
Sure. So if I understood what you just said correctly, what you're saying is that you get an email, and that email you believe is from your bank. It's got all the appropriate graphics
Hmm.
and text and that kind of thing. But when you click on that, you're really clicking and allowing the perpetrators to download information on download tools on your system, but then it
That's
also
correct.
takes you to your legitimate bank.
That's correct. So what happens is when you click on the link, it executes a script, and the script says, download this and take them to that link. So you're actually not clicking, it looks like your bank account link, but it's not. You're clicking on a link to a script that will run, and the script says, download these tools and then take that person to their bank account. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's doing multiple things. It's not just a single, just because you click on it once, it can do a lot of different things. It could do 27 different things based on the script that's running once you click on it. But that's essentially what happens is that way you're no wiser. You think, well, I just got this weird email from the bank and I clicked on it, it took me to the bank website, didn't do anything. I still had to log in. It looked legitimate. So you don't think to report it to anybody, right? Meantime, an actor just from North Korea just jumped into your network. Just jumped into your network.
Yeah, and so if you're a individual, right, and
Mhm.
you're using your cell phone to connect to the corporate network, right,
Mhm.
where you're downloading
Mhm. Mhm.
checking email or
Right.
whatever things happen to be. So threat actors are using those kinds of strategies to get access to personal phones, to get access to corporate
Yep.
networks.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. They're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at you, hoping that you'll take one of the pieces of bait. It's almost like chumming for sharks. They just throw buckets of stuff at you and hope that somebody hits something. And if they do, bingo, they're in. If not, they just keep chumming because somebody will eventually. That's why this whole industry of spam detection, et cetera, has come up over the last decade or so, is because there have to be tools in place to protect innocent users from that because they don't have the time. In fact, part of the whole initiative from the White House in this recent administration has been to put the onus back on the software makers to protect us from these kinds of things because end users don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the know-how to protect themselves from this kinds of stuff. And it's infiltrating our, how many times a day do you think somebody working in a critical infrastructure like a water treatment system also checks his personal email? So all I have to do is get to that person's personal email, have them click on a link and go, uh-oh, and I'm inside that critical infrastructure. I now have control of a $13 million three-phase pump that costs $8 million to run a year, and I can shut down gates. I can poison water. I can do all kinds of stuff. Same thing
Wow.
with the power grid. You've got a lineman out there who wants to check on his daughter's grades at school, and he clicks on a link and doesn't know any better. And next thing you know, you've got a nefarious actor inside the power network going, hey, I'm going to turn this on, I'm going to turn this off. So it's just like the best example I come up is chumming for sharks, where they just throw buckets of food out and they figure there's a shark going to show up sooner or later.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Absolutely. Well, that opens up the conversation with regards to ransomware and
Mhm.
what that really looks like for organizations. And so I know that that there's maybe I don't know if it's a misperception out there that when something like that happens, an organization is affected by ransomware, that it's something that happens, right away as soon as someone clicks on an email that allows
Sure.
that to happen. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Can you talk a little bit about what you've
Yeah.
seen and what that
Yeah.
looks like?
Yeah, it's absolutely not the case. Yeah, the way ransomware works is someone's clicked on something that launches the attack, the software that starts doing the encrypting. And it takes time to do that. You can't encrypt 60 gig of data in the blink of an eye. It takes time to do that because it reads each file and then encrypts it, encrypts it, reads a file, and encrypts it. So it takes time. So it's not uncommon at all to be able to stop a ransomware attack partway through, but you have to have tools in place or people in place watching for those kinds of activities to know that it's going on. Otherwise, and that's typically what it happens at night, happens on one of the biggest threat vectors are 3-day weekends, like Martin Luther King. I can't tell you how many times I get calls on Tuesday morning after Martin Luther King weekend where people have got hit with ransomware or they've had malicious wire transfers because nobody's watching. Nobody's watching. Same thing with Christmas holidays and New Year's and that kind of stuff. Those are prime hours for bad actors to get in to do this kinds of stuff because it takes time and there's nobody watching. If you have tools in place to monitor that kind of activity, in fact, several of Microsoft's tools now that can be deployed simply watch for anything related to encryption. If there's anything happening on your website, I mean, on your data sets that even looks like encryption, it will immediately stop the services. It'll shut the server down so that you can stop it. But unfortunately, it still happens.
Wow. Okay. But it's interesting, to get a feel from your standpoint, from your viewpoint, on the whole idea of the holidays,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
and how a lot of these kinds of activities occur over a holiday when in fact, the scout crews are, you know, they're bare bones anyway.
Yep.
right? During the
Yep.
holidays, I mean, it's even worse. So
Exactly, exactly. And it's always financial systems that get hit because nobody's watching. The CFO and all the staff are gone for the weekend, and your IT guys are bare bones, as you said, or ladies are bare bones staffed, and they just don't have the ability to keep close track on it. It's getting better because we're getting better tools that we can automate. In fact, that's one of the things where AI has become a boon, is that we can use AI tools to watch for that kind of activity and alert us or do or take actions or whatever it is what we choose to do.
sure, and I think that there's a lot of things out there from an AI standpoint that are just coming onto the market.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's still pretty new. There's AI's been around for a while, but the implementation of those types of technologies within our operational environment,
Right.
that's something we haven't really
And
have
and
not
it
changed.
is,
So,
yeah, and it still is just automation. Automation is not fail proof. Automation fails sometimes. It just does. And it's not foolproof. There are things that it can't do very well yet. You're right. It's still evolving.
mm. Well,
So
you
it's
mentioned. Sorry,
it's
go ahead.
really a matter. It's really a matter of just being vigilant.
Okay. You mentioned AI, and the whole idea around what that looks like for everyday users, and how AI technologies are being uh, implemented, right, by cyber
Hmm.
criminals to help fool and misrepresent various things, especially frankly going into an election year, or
Hmm.
election season where we got a lot of those kinds of
Yeah.
things popping
Yeah.
up. So
Yep.
can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe what some of the threats are that you've seen, and what those indicators might look like?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd encourage you to share with all your users this paper that you shared with me this morning about contextualizing deepfake threats to organizations, because there's a lot of great information in there about. Um, they don't use the term in there, but I would, and that is the weaponization of AI. That's the term I would use because that's what's happening. It's being weaponized. And when I talk about that, what I mean are things like, um, there's an example in that particular document that you shared with me, of a deep fake AI created video of Putin uh, stating that martial law had been declared because Ukraine had just invaded Russia, which never happened. But it was put out on the airwaves, and there are people who believed it. If you go back to January 6th, we're really of 2020, we're really lucky, or 2021, we're really lucky that um, that deep fakes were not used in that, because it was a disaster by itself. Had deep fakes been used to launch fake news about it, it could have been much more disastrous, much more disastrous. And by that I mean using faked videos, placing audio over people's faces. So, for instance, they take a video of me and redub different audio that's not my voice, saying things I never said, and then publishing those as if they were in fact real. Um, that's scary stuff.
It is scary stuff, and I'll put a link to that document down in the comment section, so people
Yeah,
can
there's
have access to
there's a
that.
lot of there's a lot of great examples in there of that, very specific stuff. But they don't use the term in there because that was put out by as a joint effort by the National Security Agency, the FBI, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a subsection of DHS. Um, I think they probably just don't like to alarm people, but it's weaponization, plain and clear. There's no other word to really accurately describe it.
Sure. Uh, Brian, let's talk a little bit about some real life examples that maybe you've seen in the maybe in the wild, as they call it, right? Stuff
Yeah,
that's just kind of out there floating around.
sure.
And one of the things that I really kind of hope to zero in on, through Cyber Risk Ready, is not only helping businesses get a better understanding of what's going on, and why they should be paying attention, for
Sure.
this, because a lot of times if you're not in the cybersecurity world, this stuff just kind of glazes over. But the everyday person, and the small business owners that are just out there trying to battle through the day to day, what are the things that they should be paying attention to, and what are some of those scenarios that you've seen that frankly are alarming uh, for
Well,
you?
the first one is the business owner who doesn't want to know about it. That's probably the most alarming for two reasons. One is they're going to get hurt. Okay. It's going to happen because they don't want to pay attention. And number two, they are making things worse for everybody else. Okay. This is a team effort. The more we put our heads together and deal with this from a head-on perspective, the better off we'll all be. And so the business owner who doesn't want to know about it or learn about it just says, "Look, I don't understand IT or security, and I don't want to. I don't care." Well, good luck, Bubba, because you're going to get clipped. You're going to get chummed by one of those sharks. I guarantee it, and it's going to hurt. And it could, I mean, it could bankrupt your business. I've been involved in cases where um, businesses have lost anywhere in overnight anywhere from 700,000 to $14 million, just like that, in fraudulent wire transfers. That would bankrupt most counties, some states, you know. And yet these companies, fortunately for them, were able to survive. But those are huge amounts of money. The other side of that coin is I've also worked with a couple of cases where I was able to facilitate that company getting in touch with the proper authorities who are able then to claw back, that's a term we use in the business, in law enforcement, claw back those transactions and recovered 14 of $17 million. Now, if you're a small medium business, that's a lot of money. That's a
Right.
lot of money. And to be able to have that um, returned at no cost to you. Law enforcement did this. That's what they do. That's what they get paid to do. It's not like you had to go hire a company and say, "Can you go get my money?" and pay them 10%. The FBI did this at no charge to the company. It was part of what they do. But many companies aren't aware of that, or they're afraid. We talked in the very first part of the episode today about reputational risk. They're really afraid that I don't know. They have all kinds of weird fears, but one is that people are going to find out that something bad happened to their company and that that's going to damage their company. When in fact, I think it makes them stronger by saying, "Look, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to go to law enforcement. We're going to do what we can to recover this." And in many cases, it happens. One of the one of the services that I work with the FBI, there's a team that they created a number of years ago called the Recovery Asset Team, and what that team is specifically tasked with doing is recovering funds from fraudulent wire transfers, ransomware payments, um, international wire transfers, and they have special abilities to be able to tap into the financial systems through the FDIC and through the international money transfer system SWIFT, where they can, if notified quickly enough before the transaction's clear and the money goes somewhere else, they can actually recover a humongous amount of assets. They won't publish how many millions they've recovered in the last 5 years, but it's a humongous amount of money that they've been able to recover for companies. But you have to go to them and ask for their help. If you don't, your money's gone. And the longer you wait, um, it's usually it's usually imperative that you notify law enforcement within at least within 24 hours. Beyond 24 hours, your chances just begin to drop off dramatically after that in terms of recovery. If you can contact them within an hour to 8 hours, your chances are hugely are very high of being able to recover a fair amount of your loss.
Sure. And Brian, I think that's very valuable information, and we're going to talk just a little bit more about that in just a second, but I wanted to kind of throw this out. Uh, with the vast amounts of cybercrime that is going on, and the escalations with AI, and those kinds of things, more and more SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses, they're going to be impacted by those kinds of things, and trying to get a good feel for how they should respond,
Mhm.
and what that looks like, and the time frames that need to be associated with that. In your experience with the FBI and the different businesses that you've helped facilitate into that uh, involvement with the recovery asset team, with the RAT team,
Mhm.
what does that look like? How does that engagement occur, and where do you, and sorry to compound the questions, but this is
Sure,
pretty
it's
exciting
okay.
stuff. But when you're engaging at that level, what is the basic information that you need to be able to provide to get the ball rolling, realizing that you may not have a full investigation complete, as a business owner? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom, because that's come up a couple of times, and the FBI's made it very clear they need almost nothing. All they need to know is who you are, who your company is, and that you had an event occur. And they'll contact you. I mean, you need to tell them that it's a financial event, how much money's involved as far as you know, and when it occurred. They'll get the details later. They don't need that. They need you to get on it as soon as possible. In fact, there's a I think we've talked about this before. There's a website called IC3.gov. Okay, that stands for Internet Complaint Center, ICC3.gov. You might want to put a link at that
Put a
at the
link in
bottom
there.
of the thing. Um, you can fill out a complaint form on that the minute you find out something's going on. All they need is who you are, where you are, what happened. Boom. That's it. They'll get details later because the minute you fill that out and submit it, it gets routed immediately to another team that says, oh, this is a fraudulent wire transfer. Let's get it to the rat now. And the rat picks it up and they go from there. And in fact, I've seen them return phone calls in less than 15 minutes from the time a case was opened by a company end user. That's
Wow.
pretty fast for the
That's very,
federal
very fast.
government.
For the
Yeah,
government. Yeah, that's pretty quick.
that's
Uh,
pretty fast. Yeah, they've got things in place for that, and in fact, it's taken quite a bit of effort on while I was still working as the strategic and engagement advisor, where I worked with private sector folks, explaining this to them so that in the event of some type of financial event occurs, that they get moving on it as soon as possible. Because what typically happens is they call me the day or two after and they're like, well, I don't know. I wasn't sure if I should call the FBI or what. I'm like, oh man, it's too late now. It's just too
yeah.
late. You have to get on it right away. The
In those
sooner the sooner the better.
sooner the better. In those situations where people have just concerns about engaging the federal government, uh, what would your message be to those folks?
That's a tough one because I don't do it anymore. Um, I would one of the things you could do would be to look into becoming engaged with your local InfraGard chapter, which is a private public partnership with the FBI. Um, they have access to trainings, information, that kind of stuff about what's going on. The other one is I'd say reach out to well, I think every state now. We have two um, Department of Homeland Security representatives for the I never remember what CISA stands for, the Computer and Infrastructure Security Agency. We have two agents right here in Indiana dedicated to doing nothing but working with private sector companies and government agencies to prepare for those kinds of events. They can help you with software planning, training, you name it, they've got it covered. I You can put links on at the bottom of the
Mhm.
thing. I happen to know both of those people, but that's their job 5 days a week is, excuse me, going out and working with private sector companies and individual groups. I mean, they'll come to a Rotary group and talk. They'll come to a Chamber of Commerce event and talk. They'll show you where to get tools that you can use, and they'll help you with training and implementation as well. It's really a great resource. In fact, I'm surprised that we aren't using more of that. On the government side of things, the state has done an incredible job. Indiana has done an incredible job with the advent of the Governor's Council on Cybersecurity 8 years ago. Part of that, the mission of that or objective of that organization was to build a cybersecurity website on the Indiana IoT website that provides governmental units like small cities, towns, and county governmental units with cybersecurity tools, training, and information that they need to better protect themselves.
Well, great. Yeah, I'll find that. I'll find that and put that on in the notes at the bottom of the
Okay.
presentation. So, with that, I think we're pretty much close to time. So I'd like to thank Brian for his contribution to the show and sharing his insights. And I hope to have him back on future shows. Um, so, one of the things that's important to recognize is, cybersecurity is just not a buzzword for, for technical folks. I mean, everybody needs to be paying attention to that. And the more that we can do as individuals to help process and build that, that group, right? That thinking, that change in thinking that you mentioned, where we're all in this together. That's an important concept that I don't know that people fully realize. So that's something that we'll continue to kind of foster and build through this program and others.
Well, thanks. I want to say thanks for having me on as well, Tom.
Great. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure indeed. So for those out on the show, attending the show today, so I want to hear from you. Have you experienced a cyber threat, or do you have tips on how you can stay safe online? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our other videos on cybersecurity tips to help navigate the digital age safely. So stay smart, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.